Craig, even though they're predicting this strong El Nino, it doesn't necessarily mean we'll have one.
All right, NOAA predicts this will be one of the strongest El Ninos on record. He's warning landslides could become an issue.
The term constantly comes up very often in the news and weather reports. So, what is El Nino? Our oceanography course has us covered on that, but in summary, the phenomena has the largest impact on global temperatures after the summer-winter cycle and originates due to weaker than usual trade winds every 3 to 7 years. This causes thermocline to become shallower in the West Pacific and deeper in the East Pacific, bringing warmer water masses from the east to the west via countercurrents. Hello, I'm Sadman Rahman from EESC19 Oceanography, and today's spotlight will be on the impacts of El Nino on Peruvian fisheries. In this short presentation, I'll try and explain 3 major points. How fisheries in the East Pacific are affected by El Nino, the impact of El Nino on the Peruvian fisheries in terms of the economy, and how does the country and its people deal with the phenomena. Firstly, how fisheries in the East Pacific are affected by the El Nino. The figure on the right side shows in red where upwelling occurs naturally due to Ekman transport, which moves surface water away from the coast, giving way to upwelling. The figure below shows the coast of Peru and Chile, which will be the main focus today. El Nino affects fisheries by increasing the depth of the thermocline. This weakens the cold water upwelling in places such as the coast of Peru and Chile. Upwelling is a very important phenomenon which brings cold nutrient-rich waters to a shallower level close to the surface where there is sufficient sunlight. Here the nutrients can be utilized by various photosynthetic primary producers like phytoplankton. A study conducted in 2016 along the Peruvian coast shows concentration of chlorophyll A indicating activity of nanophytoplankton over time, denoted by the red line. The gray bars indicate El Nino years. It is clearly seen that during the El Nino years such as 1965, 73, 87 and so on, the chlorophyll A concentrations were lower than usual. The same study also analyzed concentrations of zooplankton and particulate organic carbon. A similar trend in results were also obtained here, as zooplanktons are the primary consumers of phytoplankton. The concentration were lower during the El Nino years. Pelagic fish such as anchovy and sardines are usually found about 80 kilometers off the coast of Peru and Chile. These fish are filter feeders and mainly feed on different types of plankton. These foraging fish are keystone species in the food web because they play a vital role as prey to secondary consumers of higher trophic levels such as salmon, tuna, and whales, helping maintain a healthy marine ecosystem. Numerous fisheries also depend on these foraging fish, which brings us to the next major point: impact of El Nino on Peruvian fishing industry and the economy. The Peruvian anchovy fisheries as a whole, being one of the largest fisheries, holds the record of largest single-species fishing industry in the world. 68% of anchovies worldwide are caught in Peru. Surprisingly, only 1% of the anchovies are used for human consumption, where 99% are used for other purposes like making of fish oil and fish meal for commercial fish farms. They are mainly exported to China and Europe. Peru is the largest exporting country of fish meal in the world. The fishing industry is the 3rd largest contributor to Peru's gross domestic product, or GDP. It employs around 230,000 people as full-time and even more if informal jobs are taken into account. The numbers show how crucial this industry is for Peru. The anchovy population dynamics are interesting and very volatile to changes. The data obtained from the Peruvian Ministry of Production shows catches of anchovy in millions of metric tons over time. On the right is a figure previously shown for reference to the El Nino years. The data shows during the El Nino years, the catches of anchovies are very low. Years like 1973, 83, and 1998 combinations of overfishing and El Nino almost wiped out the entire anchovy population. After 1973, it took almost 10 years for the population to jump back. Recent data from Peru's GDP from 2002 to 2016 shows varying levels of GDP growth. The El Nino years are marked in data and denoted by the gray boxes. It is clearly visible that the country experiences close to zero and even negative growth during some of the El Nino years. This is mainly because El Nino adversely affects the anchovy populations, which are a significant part of Peru's economy. For the final point, how does the country and its people deal with this phenomenon? A lesson was learned right after the record catch of 13 million tons in 1970, followed by an El Nino in 1973, which decimated the anchovy population and crippled the fishing industry and the country's economy. The effect lasted for almost a decade and was the result of a combination of overfishing and warmer waters with low upwelling, courtesy of weak trade winds. United Nations stated that anchovies are the most heavily exploited fish in the world history. In 2009, the government introduced individual vessel quotas and licenses termed Maximum Catch Limit per Vessel Law. Major regulations included recording of all catch at landing zones, no entry of new fishing vessels, monitoring ships using satellites, revoking of license for breaking the rules, and introducing a temporary fishing ban when significant proportion of anchovies were still juvenile. As the anchovies are used primarily for fish meal, it serves as a food for other fish which are then consumed by humans. This means that we are introducing one more trophic level between us and the anchovies when we use it as fish meal instead of directly consuming it. The basis for the idea of using anchovies primarily for human consumption is that about 90% of energy is lost at each point in the trophic level as heat, and only 10% is transferred to the next level as biomass. Pressures on overfishing would decrease if anchovies were used for human consumption, as less would be needed to feed the same amount of people. The government of Peru has started marketing anchovies for human consumption to reduce starvation and protein malnutrition in poor communities. Mostly canned, the consumption has gone up from about 5,000 tons to over 160,000 tons in just a few years after implementing these policies and promotions. So, to summarize everything, the effects of El Nino are global and various geographical locations are affected very differently. In locations such as Peru, the El Nino increases the depth of the thermocline, which reduces the cold water upwelling. This causes a reduction in nutrient supply for primary producers such as phytoplankton. There are shortages of food for foraging fishes such as anchovies that feed on these plankton during the El Nino phase. In Peru, large part of their GDP depends on fishing industry, which heavily relies on catching anchovies. Due to large demand, overfishing results, and combined with El Nino, the foraging fish populations decrease substantially, affecting the entire marine food web and Peru's economy. Various governmental policies such as fishing quotas and bans were implemented. Incentives for switching from using anchovies for fish meals to using them more for human consumption will directly lower demand for anchovies and also solve Peru's protein deficiency and malnutrition problem. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and I hope now you're more up to date with how El Nino is affected to Peruvian fisheries. Thank you for watching.